right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to welcome to BookEnds Online Edition, produced by the Wadena County Historical Society and Travelin' Storyseller in collaboration with New York Mills Regional Cultural Center. BookEnds is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from Five Wings Arts Council, thanks to legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. BookEnds programs from earlier this year are now available on the website of the Wadena County Historical Society at www.wadenacountyhistory.org. Today's program will be available on the website shortly. Books from today's speaker are also available on the website or directly through Travelin' Storyseller. That website is www.travelin, spelled TRAVELIN apostrophe, storyseller.com. BookEnds is a monthly literary event connecting readers and writers. During the pandemic, it will be held via Zoom on the second Saturday of the month at 11:30 a.m. Next month's speaker will be J. Ryan Straddle, author of The Lager Queen of Minnesota. Today's program features Alex Messenger, author of The 29th Day. This book is an incredible memoir about his life-threatening encounter with a grizzly bear during a canoe trip in the Canadian tundra. If you have questions for the author, feel free to enter them through chat. Now let's welcome BookEnds Online Edition and our author, Alex Messenger.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, welcome.
It's great to be here. It's a beautiful Saturday, and thanks everyone for coming. It's fun to be able to still get together even though the pandemic has us physically apart. So
Yep.
It's a great opportunity. So I'll just get right into kind of the programming that I have together. I like to start events by reading a section from my book, and that's from the Prologue. And I'll just jump right into that and then share a bit more about the story and then open it up for any questions that you guys have. Prologue. The cool wind blowing across the subarctic tundra rustled the thin nylon of my tent, the crisp air refreshing and relaxing me. Sunlight shone through a thin haze of high cirrus clouds, gently warming the tent, adding to my sense of well-being. I was comfortable, cozily tucked away in my sleeping bag, and soon fell into a deep slumber. It was mid-afternoon on the 29th day of a 600-mile canoe journey that I'd embarked on with 5 other paddlers. From the depth of a dream, I jolted awake, sitting upright and gasping, my mind lurching toward consciousness. My chest heaved, lungs filling as if I had come up from under a wave. My dream was already forgotten. Alarmed, I looked around the tent. In a place with no sense of time, I was overcome with the uneasy feeling that I was late for something. Pushed by that unsettling sense of urgency, I threw on my clothes and shoes and left the tent, crossing the hill in long strides. I began climbing the steep, rocky ridge above our campsite. Still feeling late and shaking off the lingering fog of my nap, I was soon breathing heavily from the hard ascent. It took several minutes to gain the 100 vertical feet of the ridge. At the top, I found a lunar landscape of gently rolling granite domes scattered with smaller stones. I was 400 feet above the wide blue expanse of Princess Mary Lake and could see 30 miles in all directions. The treeless vista was startling in its grandeur, the scale difficult to comprehend. Barely able to take it all in, I turned toward another slightly higher point in the distance, topped with a rock cairn and a nookshuk, and resumed my hike. My Nikon in its waterproof case hung heavily in my hand. I decided I would leave it closed until I reached my destination. I walked past small, round boulders deposited along the ridge by lumbering glaciers eons ago. The large crescent moon of the island bowed in front of me, pointing north toward the Arctic Circle. I walked, watching the ground beneath me, the sparkles of sunlight in the granite and the green-gray blooms of lichen. The feeling of tardiness slowly ebbed, and I began to calm down, my mind wandering. I thought about my coming senior year of high school and the summer reading book in my pocket, The Liars Club. Quickly casting that thought aside, I thought of my camera case and imagined what I wanted to shoot first. I passed more lichen and granite, more scrub grass. Taking out the camera or reading the book seemed like too much effort right then, and the thought of sitting near the Inukshuk seemed perfect. Halfway to the cairn, I was still studying the ground, walking up one of the gentle granite domes. Something flashed in the upper periphery of my vision. My head snapped up. 30 feet in front of me, at the top of the dome, an image materialized. Brown fur. My core tightened and my pulse doubled. All the muscles from my shoulders to my legs tensed at once. I thought of the ornery musk oxen we had seen earlier. We had been warned they were quite dangerous. As my brain decoded the firing synapses and visual signals, I made a far more horrifying realization. This was no muskox. It was much worse. At this instant, the creature's gaze met mine. I was staring into the sharp black eyes of a grizzly bear. So that's where we're headed. But it took a little while to get there. And I'll share my screen and kind of tell you guys a bit about the story and how we got there. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep.
If anyone wants to find me online, you can find me at a messenger photo in social spaces or www.alexmessenger.com. So my story really starts when I was a kid. I was very adventurous as a young child, and that I owe a lot to my parents. They were both anthropologists studying ancient cultures, and they both worked at Hamlin University during my formative years. My dad was an anthropology professor. My mom worked in administration, but they co-taught these study abroad trips. So from the age 3 on, I was exploring foreign countries for about a month a year, and this is, I think, on the Temple of the Magician down in Mexico. And I don't know, I was probably 5 or something, but they really instilled in me from an early age this sense of adventure. From those early days with with traveling abroad, we started to go camping, and we found our way to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota. And that's really where we started to experience actual wilderness and canoe camping, which is just an amazing experience. And very different from a lot of other forms of travel and of camping. But we progressively went on longer and more adventurous trips. I think the first time we went on a portage that was 60 rods, which is something like a quarter mile, and we were just dumbfounded by how long of a portage that was. And that's really not long at all. The longest portage in the Boundary Waters is 2 miles, and then the Grand Portage is 8.5 miles. So a quarter mile is pretty much nothing. But that's where I got the adventure bug. I eventually went to YMCA Camp Minojan, and they do wilderness-based trips with kids from 12 to 18. And it's all about this transformational experience and this kind of crucible trip where you get to learn a lot about yourself and kind of learn what you're capable of. And I also learned how much I had yet to learn and to experience, and how much more efficiently we could travel. So I got the bug again, and just went on longer and more intense trips with that. Went from 8 days to 21 days in the Quetico, and then a month in southern Canada paddling rivers, and then finally for this last trip, the pinnacle trip at camp, which is Oms du Nord, which is mispronounced French, but it's a 42-day whitewater canoe trip in northern Canada. It's the longest that the camp offers, and everyone that goes on it has been invited back to a number of experiences. So everybody's very well versed in the woods, and it's kind of the most intense that it can be. So that's me on the lower right. I look exactly the same if I take my glasses off and shave. Haven't aged a day, but that's me at 17 with the other folks from my group, the guys group, and then the girls group in Jay Cook State Park, just south of Duluth at the start of the trip. went there, did our whitewater training, and got our skills refreshed from the previous year, and got ready to make our way up into Canada for the trip. So the area we'd be paddling is that box up there northwest of Hudson Bay. Right now I'm sitting at the tip of Lake Superior. I imagine a lot of you guys are, just a little to the left of that, and a little bit further south. So that's quite a ways up. So the distance between the U.S. border and the end of our trip was 1,000 miles north of that border. So incredibly remote. So from our training in Jay Cook, we went up to camp where we got all our gear fitted out. We packed our food. Then we got on the road and we drove for several days to the end of the road in northern Manitoba in Lynn Lake. And then we took a bush flight on a twin otter float plane to the southeast corner of the Northwest Territories to start our 600-mile journey. From that point, it would be totally up to us. We'd be self-reliant. We had no food drops, no expected link ups with anyone. So really, really remote. So there's our float plane, our 3 canoes, most of our gear there, not quite all of it, but we had to fit it all in there. Little game of Tetris, disassembling the boats. A little terrifying when you're relying on your boats to take them apart right before you go, but that's the only way they'd fit. Once we were in the air, it was just this stunning, vast, empty landscape. Like I said, it was the end of the road when we started, so to get more remote it's hard to imagine. In the Boundary Waters, we're really, really lucky that this amazing place exists so close and you can get into the wilderness. But whenever you're in there, you're within a pretty short period of time of getting to a road. You're 1, maybe 2 days at most. And when you're up in this area, it's just wilderness on a whole different scale. And the trees are in the taiga, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So after we'd be landing, the plane would drop us off, we'd put our boats back together, and then we'd be paddling along the Dubuant River into Nunavut province through Dubuant Lake, which is the largest lake in Nunavut, making our way up into a series of lakes and then another series of rivers before we got to Baker Lake. So when we landed, we were greeted by the wildlife right away. These are the mosquitoes. There were also black flies, and they were just, again, on a whole different scale. And we were pretty happy that we had our bug nets with us. We started paddling the river right away, which was just amazing. We were running whitewater. We were running it very conservatively, so we weren't trying to race or go over crazy waves or whatever. We were trying to get from point A to point B with as little water into the boat as possible, which was still a ton of fun. Partway into the trip, this is the middle of the summer, 2005. I don't think I gave that date before. So 15 years ago. 15 years ago right now was probably about when this picture was taken. So when we got to Dubuant Lake, it was 80% covered in ice. So middle of summer, incredibly cold area, and that proved to be quite the challenge. But just with everything on this trip, it's up to us, and we raised to the challenge and walked over the ice and slogged through the ice, and it was somewhat misadventurous, but quite adventurous nonetheless. At the end of Dubuant Lake was when we first got into Nunavut, and it was about 3 weeks into the trip, and it was our first layover day. So got to the end of the lake, got to this portage, and we finally took a rest right next to this tumbling canyon with this these amazing waterfalls and these amazing whitewater sets that we'd never run in our own canoes. But it was gorgeous. And that layover day, which is a day where you're not traveling, you're just hunkered down in one spot, that next day we spotted something moving on the horizon, and I was standing with Mike, who was the gentleman in the bug net, and he pointed at it, and we both looked, and we realized that it was a grizzly bear. It was our first grizzly bear of the trip. And this is a very, very zoomed in, a bit shaky, but it's the grizzly bear turning tail and walking away after we yelled to alert our companion that's running away. At that point, we reviewed all of our bear protocols. It hadn't been that long before this picture was taken that we had entered grizzly country. We started before we were in grizzly country, and we paddled into their area as we made our way down river. But we'd always been aware of them. We had brought various things with us, like bear spray, bear poppers, which are a really loud noise-making deterrent device, various other things. Talked about how to interact with the bear if we stumble upon one, supposed to speak to it calmly, kind of establish that you're a human, back away slowly, never run. So we went through all that stuff again and talked about, how to stay safe around bears, and made sure our camp was set up properly. And it was a pretty sobering experience. And I turned to our guide Dan and I said to him, this is amazing that we saw a grizzly bear, but this is the only way I'd ever want to see a bear in the wild, and that's far away on the other side of a raging canyon, with it going in the opposite direction. What I didn't realize was I was foreshadowing what would happen to me in 9 days. So from Dubois Canyon, we kept making our way north. We saw another one of the animals that we have to be wary of, which is a musk oxen. It's this big yak-like creature that basically hasn't changed since the Ice Age. They're incredibly powerful. They can charge at random, and they can fight off grizzly bears, and they're definitely something to be respected. So we kept our eyes out for them, and also appreciated being able to see them. I think our pictures might be blocking the view of the canoes on this, but this is actually a portage that we took to get from one river system to another. And it was a route that we'd never seen people do before, and just this amazing 4-kilometer hike with our canoes over what this feature is, which is called an esker. It's a glacial formation that's the former riverbed from within a glacier. So the riverbed had rocks and sediment in it, and then when the ice melts, that sediment deposits on the ground, and it makes a raised ridge, which is a little bit backwards from how you imagine a river, but it's just this sinuous, winding path that ends up making like a what feels like a dirt road, which is great to carry your gear on. But that took us to our next area of the route, and some of our best fishing. The fishing had been amazing, but this was my biggest fish that I caught, a lake trout. I wouldn't have been able to hold it up at the beginning of the trip, but by this time I had gotten a lot stronger. And so this is the before and after picture. Before, and then right before we were cooking it, and it was a delicious fish. There's more about that episode in the book, of course. So we kept making our way north, and eventually we get to Princess Mary Lake. This is day 28, and Princess Mary Lake is this enormous, beautiful lake. It's about 25 miles wide at its widest point. The scale up there is just amazing. Like I said at the beginning, we started in the taiga, which is a very small trees and very small vegetation, kind of like everything's in miniature. And then as you continue north, it gradually gets smaller and smaller until there's like pretty much nothing left, maybe bushes, but you end up in the tundra, and the tundra has no trees. So it's a very sparse landscape like you've seen in some of the photos. But Princess Mary Lake, with the size of the lake and the sparseness of the ground and everything, it was just felt like we were paddling in the sky. It was just amazing. And in the top right of this photo is the island where we decided to make camp. So we made camp on this island on day 28. Day 29, we get another layover day. This is, well, the 29th day of the trip. And we get up and we just, like any other layover day, it's a sequence of one meal after the other. You eat breakfast, and then you're excited about eating lunch. So we got through lunch, and then everybody was going to go up this ridge to explore the top, to see what the highest point around could offer in terms of views and kind of what mysteries laid up there. And I was just incredibly tired, and we've kind of caught up with ourselves with the prologue there. Um, and I was very tired, and I said, you guys go up there, I'll meet you later. So I laid down for a nap, and I wasn't sure how long I'd slept. Mike just told me recently that it was 3 hours that they were up there, which is just amazing. So I took a Rip Van Winkle nap, and then woke up with a start, got out of the tent. Everyone was back except for our guide, Dan, and I started up this ridge and met him part way. And it took me about 10 minutes to climb up this ridge, making my way from this very unstable ground to better rock and whatever. And then at the top, it leveled out into what you see here, which is just this lunar landscape, very sparse. Again, no trees. It really felt like an alpine environment. And I was walking up one of these granite domes, like you heard in the prologue, and I didn't know it, but a 600-pound barren ground grizzly bear was walking up the other side, and we were walking towards each other right on a straight line. So we walk into each other's line of sight, and the bear and I both had the same reaction, which was just like, oh my God, what am I looking at? And both startled. I'll stop screen sharing here because we just hang out on that picture for a while. So the bear and I both looked at each other and we're like, what am I looking at? And I realized right then that I was just in the worst case scenario, and my pulse doubled, and I was just suddenly terrified. Like I was alone. I was in sandals. I thought back to what we'd been trained to do when we see a grizzly bear. I imagined using the bear spray, pulling it out of its holster, taking off the safety, aiming and firing. But the bear spray was in our tent, and so I couldn't use it. And so then I thought back to the other stuff we were doing. So I backed away slowly. I spoke calmly to it, tried to convince it that I wasn't a threat, that I was a human, whether that meant anything to it or not. So I said, hey, bear, whoa, bear, it's okay, bear. And it did a couple stationary bluff charges, and I kept backing away slowly, and it just would launch forward onto its paws and try to like grunt at me to scare me away, and kept backing away slowly. And it eventually faded from stationary bluff charges to a full speed charge and came at me, and I faded from hey bear, whoa bear to yelling obscenities and help, and trying to alert the guys that I was in dire straits. And the whole time it was just the situation was escalating and the bear was getting closer, and I just started to worry that my life was about to end. And that was terrifying and just incredibly sad to me. And it's barreling at me, and I had my camera in its pelican case, which is a hard-sided case, so I had about a 15-pound brick of camera, and it's the only time I'll throw my camera, and it's the only time a throw of mine hit something it was supposed to, because I was a terrible shot. But just on instinct, I threw it underhand, and I hit the bear square on the nose with enough force to turn its head all the way to the side, and I was able to dodge it on that first pass. And as soon as it realized it missed me, it came at me again, and I dodged it several more times before it bit at me and missed, and then reached up with its paw and swiped me across the face, which is a huge amount of force. And my head whipped to the side, and I went flying to the side. And as I was still falling, it threw me to the ground hard onto my tailbone. And in that same instant, its head was right at the top of my leg, right at the hip. And it bit down. And people are like, so the adrenaline rush take care of the pain? And it did not. I felt its teeth on both sides of my thigh, and then I blacked out. I basically had a vasovagal response and hit my body's kill switch. and I'd been so sure that I was about to die, and then the lights went out, and it was just the most terrible moment ever for me. And it was just all wrong. It wasn't how things were supposed to go for me. So the next instant, I remember I didn't know which way was up, finally caught the horizon, reoriented myself, and then I realized that the bear was still there, and then I played dead consciously until it was gone, and waited until it was gone completely, had gone back over the ridge, gone back down the other side, and then I started running back to camp, such as I was able. My adrenaline was just going at the red line. My leg was pretty damaged, but I wasn't quite sure how badly it was damaged, but it wasn't spurting blood. So I just started running back to the group, which was 200 yards away as the crow flies, and the last 50 yards were 100 vertical feet down. And it was that ridge that had taken me 10 minutes to climb up. So I still had a little ways to get back, and the whole time I was worried that the bear was going to come back and finish the job. But I finally got to the top of the ridge, looked down at the guys, and yelled, "Bear!" And they looked up and they thought I was joking. It's like, "No, bear!" And so I eventually was able to convince them that it was a bear, that I wasn't joking, and I started running down the ridge, and I was like, I got attacked by a bear, and I got hit in the face, not if I'm cut, and I got bit in the thigh, and there's blood on my foot for some reason, and I don't know why, because I had sandals on and my other foot was all bloody. But finally made it down there, and Dan started doing a head-to-toe exam to make sure I didn't have any immediate life threats. But at that point, like I said, we were still 1,000 miles from the U.S.-Canadian border, and we had about 100 miles or more of paddling to get to this tiny town at the end of our route. And after checking me over and making sure that I didn't have any imminent life threats and that my arteries weren't spurting out my blood all over the tundra, he picked up the sat phone to call, and we found out that a helicopter was not available. So that's kind of the first string, and then it would be up to us to figure out how to get out from there, and it would be around a week before I'd get evacuated. But there's a lot that happened in that time, so I don't want to give away too many spoilers. I've given away a lot, but that's not where the story ends. It keeps going from there. So I'll kind of leave it there and see what questions people have, or I can tell the story about how the book came to be, or something like that. So have any questions been coming in as we've been talking or beforehand?
I'm not seeing any, but I have lots. Do
Yes.
do you still go on adventures in the woods? Did that like alter how you feel about being in wilderness areas and
It definitely
frequency?
could have. Yeah, I that was one of the things I was always really worried about after I got home and knew I was going to be fine. It was like, okay, well, outdoors are such an important part of my life, and I don't want to not be able to go out and experience the woods. So it was really hard for me. And the days following the attack, I just was seeing bears everywhere. Eventually that calmed down, but the kind of lasting effect was that my startle response was just crazy. And I was just always worried that a bear encounter would happen when I was in the woods after this trip. And that with time and with some very intentional acts got a lot better. So like I said, I didn't want it to keep me from doing it, so I knew I had to get back out into the woods, and I had to kind of figure out what controls I needed to put in place to improve my comfort level and make it so that I could go out there. So family and friends were really helpful with helping set up those opportunities. So within a couple weeks of the event, well, I still had wounds that were, bandaged. We went to a family friend's cabin outside of Ely, which is in the woods, and got startled by buzzards flying from a tree in the middle of the night and all kinds of stuff. And I was just a bit of a wreck. And then, like, going to the Boundary Waters the next year, I had a tactical vest on with bear spray and a machete for some reason, and all this stuff that's like pretty over the top and unnecessary, but that's kind of the security blanket I needed at the time. But I mean, the nice thing about, not the nice thing, but one of the things about a bear attack that makes it uh, I don't know, a little bit easier to comprehend, I suppose, is that there's a lot that you can do to prevent it and a lot that you can do to stop it once it starts. Sometimes, it's out of your power, but typically, if you're avoiding a surprise encounter with the bear by making your presence known, by talking and not going around blind turns without making a bunch of noise, or being in a group bigger than one, can just keep that from happening in the first place. And then if you do stumble upon one it's going to make an encounter with you, having a deterrent with you like bear spray can make a huge difference. Some people choose to carry firearms, where a lot of training to be able to use it in the situation. But I would say if bear spray would work, then a firearm is a kind of unfortunate outcome for the bear. So, but all those tools that you can use to influence your fate, I think, help a lot with kind of overcoming something like this, at least for me. So,
And do you still hang out with the guys from the trip at all, or are in touch with any of them?
a little bit. I've been in touch with all of them. It was really important to me when I was getting the book together and before publishing to talk with each of them and to get their permission to use their names in it. So I've been in touch with all of them. I am frequently in touch with a couple of them. The guy Dan, Mike, who was the guy with the bug net, and he ended up flying out with me in the helicopter when I finally was evacuated. Um, I've kept in touch with those guys a fair amount, and you know, a group that is pretty unique, and they're close to an experience that no one else was close to. So if anyone understands something like that, it's those guys. So that's a pretty a special bond
So,
that we have.
cool. A little bit about what led you to write the book, because a lot of people that do, usually when we do them live, a lot of the people that come to our group and will probably watch this later
Yeah,
are writers themselves, or aspiring, or very curious about process and
yeah,
motivation and stuff like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about what led you to write the book and your processes? Did you keep a
yeah.
journal on the trip?
I did keep a journal. The journal was absolutely well, I don't know if it was critical, but I would have had such a challenge writing this without that journal. Um, so I kept a daily journal. That was a practice I learned through those trips with my parents as a kid. One of the assignments that they had all of those college students do on every trip was to keep a detailed journal. And the assignment was not, just write about whatever you want, write about your breakfast and whatever. The ask was that the students write substantive stuff about all of the sites that we were going to, observations of culture, things like that. So I was really instilled with an observational perspective from an early age. And so whenever I journal, that's kind of um, the angle that I take, although I also include every meal that I eat, which can make the editing kind of painful. So I had that source material in the journal, and I'd always wanted to write a book. So inspiration, um, my mom has been a professional editor of a number of books, Phyllis Messenger. She's co-authored a couple. So the publishing side of things was in the family. That's all like academic books, which is different genre, of course. But she kind of showed me that it was possible. And from an early age, I wanted to write a book, and I didn't know what to write about. I always had trouble figuring out the topic and having one line that could be an entire book. And after this happened, it was a pretty obvious topic to write about.
Yeah.
And it was a story that is very people, are always very interested in it. And I knew it was a story that I wanted to tell more broadly, and I wanted to tell it at a level of detail that's hard to do outside of something like a book. So knowing that and having kind of that source material and that experience, I still took a huge amount of time to actually actively start writing the book. Part of that was I wanted to try to figure out the meaning of this whole experience for me personally. I talked a little bit about some of the challenges to overcome afterwards. So there was that as well. Visiting a trauma like this is a very challenging thing to do, and I didn't know if I was ready. And again, I wanted to figure it out. So I wanted to give myself time decompression, time to kind of heal a bit before I started writing it. But I started transcribing very shortly afterwards. So the journal was, I think it was like 55 handwritten pages, and I have very tiny handwriting, so it was a lot of text. I also have terrible handwriting, so it was really hard. And I just expanded this source document as I did that. So uh, it was way too much text when I finished that, and it wasn't very narrative. So I had a lot of work to do. But as far as like creating that primary document, I started that right away, and then within about 10 years, I had the book done.
Cool.
So yeah.
Are you going to tell us a little bit about the experience quit getting back to? Because that was an adventure in itself, wasn't it?
Like getting back after the
Y-
actual attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was. Like I said, we didn't have the a helicopter available, so then we had to use what we had. One of the things that was really lucky, like I said, I didn't have an imminent life threat, and if that had happened, if I had had an imminent life threat, they would have deployed something like the military, which would have sent like a transport plane from who knows where, parachute, uh, pararescuemen in there to patch me up, which is of course it's amazing that we have those resources generally available. Not generally, but sort of available.
Yeah.
But it's not without risk. It's a high risk rescue. It's putting those service persons at risk. And in my case, they would have not really done too much different from what was already being done. If it had been like ephemeral bleed or something like that, they have interventions that they can take that can prolong a person's life. And there's a story about a bear attack in which that happened in the not too distant past, I think in Alaska, where pararescuemen came in and gave units of blood to a bear attack victim deep in the wilderness, a hunter who was very gravely injured. So anyway, I was very lucky that my injuries were such that we were able to manage them with the wilderness responder training that Dan had with the substantive med kit that we had with us. So we are trying to get out as quickly as we could. I was able to paddle, which was very helpful because we were canoeing and we were whitewater canoeing. There was very little walking that we had to do the rest of the trip. So walking was I couldn't do until about a day after, and then I could step very, very awkwardly, but I could ambulate on my own that next day. But like I alluded to, we ended up having some pretty substantial challenges after the bear attack. We got stuck in a rainstorm, which is pretty rare up there. We ended up losing one of our canoes in this storm with the rest of our food, which was just a terrible blow. The group rose to the occasion and went out searching for that equipment, and didn't find the canoe, but found some of the food. And like with any injury like this, it ended up it has a high risk of infection. It's a very hard wound to manage. The wound itself was primarily a puncture wound from one of the canines that went in a quarter inch from my femoral artery. So I talked about that bleed as being a huge danger, and it was incredibly close to that. So very lucky that missed it. I had compression wounds from a bunch of other teeth that wrapped around my leg, that didn't break the skin, but did a huge amount of tissue damage. So there were a lot of things that we were monitoring for, compartment syndrome, basically a swelling of all that tissue that would impede blood flow to anything downstream on my leg, and then of course the infection from that wound. So we were aggressively managing that, but despite that, it still got infected, and we treated it, but it did not respond to our treatments, which included antibiotics. So at that point, it became a situation that we were no longer able to manage with the tools that we had, and a helicopter had become available at that point. So yeah, then I finally got on a helicopter, and I was really sad to go. I didn't want to leave. I mean, it was very challenging and very taxing on me mentally and physically. But I wanted to stay with the group, and I wanted to finish what we'd started. And when you're on an expedition like this, you're so self-reliant, and a challenge comes up, and you don't kind of put your hands up and say, well, I guess I can't do anything. Anything that comes your way is something that you have to figure out on your own, or it's out of your scope, and you have to do something like pull a sat phone out, which is the situation that we ended up in. But the mindset is such that any obstacle or challenge that you come to is a problem that you are going to figure out in some form. So to not have the power to do that it's kind of hard to take, but it's important to recognize when you get into that kind of a situation, and then call on those external resources that can help you out of that jam. So it was really fortunate that we had the satellite phone with us, and we're able to do that and do that two-way communication. Like I said, this was 2005, which is the year that YouTube was founded as a company. So that we had technology like satellite phones was really good.
Yeah. Do you think having the whole experience of, being in the wilderness with your friends, and like you were saying, you're relying on yourself to take care of everything, and then having survived the bear attack, do you think that it colors how you look at life now? Like, it seems like a lot of us are fearful of things that, compared to what you went through, is like, oh, please, it's a trip to the grocery store.
Yeah, which I mean, that's right now that can be, depending on where you are, pretty scary,
Yes.
where your own uh comorbidities and things. But yeah, it's given me a perspective of pretty much coming at everything with that idea of it being something that you can figure out. And again, it's either something that you can figure out and handle on your own, or it's something that you can call upon other resources, and that can solve it. But then I learned, I think there's a lesson that I learned through a class that I took in college on Buddhism, that is about worry and your ability to control a situation. And there's basically two options. If you're confronted with a situation and you have the ability to influence it, then you shouldn't worry about it, because you have the ability to influence it, and you should just take those steps to make whatever change it is that you're wanting to change. So you don't need to worry, because you can take action. And then the other side of it is that you don't have the power to influence this situation. And that's another time when you shouldn't worry, because worry is not going to accomplish anything. You can't affect it. So you shouldn't worry. You should take action or acknowledge that it's something that you can't influence. And I think learning that in college, which was after my bear experience, was a bit of an aha moment for me, because it had been a perspective that I've taken for a number of years. Because in the wilderness specifically, you have the ability to do a lot of things, and then there's other things that you can't. You can't influence the weather. Um, excuse me. You can't uh, influence where an animal is going to go necessarily. You can influence it once it gets within a certain distance of you. But realizing what you can and can't control, I think, is really powerful. And then just becoming comfortable with the stuff that you can't control, or at least comfortable with the fact that you can't control it. And just influencing what you can. So I try to take that to pretty much everything that I approach in life, and I think it's super helpful, and
Yeah.
helps my blood pressure. So
Wow.
that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, because it just seems like, wow, after you've been attacked by a bear and survived, after spending all those days in the wilderness, like so far away from everything, like you lose your food. It's not like, oh, now we got to go to the store and get more food. It's like, oh my God, we can't find it and catch it and kill it, eat it. There is no food. I mean,
Right.
all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then you come back to civilization and you see all these people so anxious and afraid, and you think, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely puts things into perspective. It kind of distills life to, your wants and your needs, for sure. And then, what's worth freaking out about. One of the really stark contrasts for me was I talked about the trips that I went on with my parents. They were planning for a Peru trip the following January after my bear attack. And part of prep for that was a trip that we took just as a family the month before this trip that I went on. So we went to Peru in June, and Peru's it's got the Andes going through it, amazing mountain range with lots of steep drops and everything. And
Yeah.
and I had a bit of a fear of heights at that time. And there were trails that we were on where I was just like, oh, rubbery legs trying to scoot along the edge, and really scared, or walking along a path that's like a sidewalk. You're not going to typically fall off a sidewalk, but when you've got 1,000-foot drop on the one side, it feels
Oh,
like you are.
yeah.
And so that was very, very scary for me at that time. And then 2 days after I got home from this Peru trip, I went up to Northern Canada, which was just kind of crazy in itself. But had this experience with the bear attack, and then had the opportunity, I healed, my injuries healed about 2 months after the bear attack. So late September, I no longer had bandages on. I still had some physical repercussions, and couldn't use my leg fully for about a year until I did some PT. But for all intents and purposes, I was able-bodied, and you wouldn't look at me and go, "My goodness, what happened?" So I was able to go on this Peru trip in January, the following January, and go to those same exact trails. And that fear was gone. I was on the same spot, same 1,000-foot drop, and I could walk up to the edge and look down and go, I'm not going to fall. So I didn't expect that. And it was, I think it was empowering, because it wasn't like I was foolish or had false sense of invincibility. I just kind of had this new perspective of, you know, what what's gonna hurt me, and what don't I need to worry about.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I have that fear of heights too. Gillette and I went to the Grand Canyon. She'll tell you it took us longer to go down than go up, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna fall. But I don't think I want a bear attack to get me over that.
Yeah, there's a loss of control when you're getting attacked by something that's just terrifying. But
Yeah.
heights and anything that just scares you it's scary.
Yeah.
It's real.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
do you have I liked your photographs. I saw some of those were your friends, right? That you showed earlier.
Yeah,
But
there were just a couple photos taken by the other guy. Pretty much the photos of the island itself. I ended up not getting pictures at the top.
right. Yeah.
Although people are like, "Why didn't you take a picture of the bear?" And I was like, "I was busy."
Yeah. Throwing your case at the bear.
Exactly. Yeah, it's over there somewhere. I can't take pictures.
Yeah. Do you still do photography? Are you planning to write more books or?
Yes to both. I still do photography. I have a photography business that's primarily lifestyle and stock photos. So I go on trips and adventures, and I sell photos of that to like magazines like Backpacker and Outside and National Geographic and Men's Journal and things like that. So that lets me still do my really rewarding trips, and I don't have to. I can take pictures for me basically, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then writing, I do plan on writing more books. Luckily for me, I don't have more than one experience like getting attacked by a bear
Right.
with the stakes like that. So I'm still figuring out what that next book is going to be, but I'm actively working on concepts, and it's such a rewarding process to me, writing a book, and it's just every aspect of it is it's really hard, but it's so cool and rewarding. I want to keep doing it.
Cool. Yeah. One of their questions was that they felt that your book was structured similar to a thriller. Would you ever consider, using some of your outdoor and travel experience and around the world writing like a fiction book or a thriller or something like that?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the uh, options I'm thinking about, and working on a couple different plot possibilities for that. I think it'd be really fun to do that, because you can make it whatever you want it to be. So, and yeah, using personal experiences to inspire a book, I think, just helps with the authenticity of it.
Oh yeah.
One of the other areas that I get outdoors in is with the St. Louis County Rescue Squad, which is our search and rescue unit for St. Louis County from south of Duluth all the way up to the Boundary Waters. So there's a lot of experiences from that I think would uh, fit well with a fiction like that. So
Cool.
I think there's a good chance that whether it's this next one or a subsequent one, there will be some thrillers involved. So
Awesome.
thanks for the corroboration of that.
And is there any place you haven't been yet or any adventure that you're hoping to do before you're too old to enter?
It's a good question. There's a lot of places I want to go. There's a lot of places I've been, which is really cool. I want to go back to northern Canada, to where this happened. I think that would be a very cathartic experience for me. It's very hard to get there. There are flights up to Baker Lake, which is this town that we paddled. Were paddling towards and then flew out of. But I don't know if that feels, it's not cheating, but I think it'd be really cool to be able to kind of paddle in, even if it was a shorter version of the trip, just paddling the last like week or whatever of it. So that's on there. And then I've always had a dream of going to Antarctica. I think it'd be really cool. It's a very sparse landscape, very different. I have a number of friends who work at like McMurdo or South Pole Station, and always jealous. I just convinced my wife that we should do that. I don't know why.
It doesn't seem when you're looking at tourist brochures, ooh, Antarctica, look at all
Hmm.
the snow.
Yeah, I guess I like stark,
Yeah.
rugged, out there places, so kind of fits with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then everywhere else. So I want to go everywhere else too.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, um, any advice you'd have for anybody who like I'm sitting here listening to you going, well, except for the bear attack thing, I'm really jealous because Gillette and I have traveled to a lot of places and we go camping and everything, but we don't really have like weeks. It's usually like in the Porkies, we thought we heard a bear in the middle of the night, and apparently it was somebody snoring in a tent because we met everybody in the morning because we were singing on our way in at 1 a.m. to keep the bears away,
Yep.
and I've missed seeing like oh, you just missed the wolves, and we did encounter a pack though in the middle of the night,
Oh, wow.
and
That's cool.
yeah,
That's
because
awesome.
my flashlight caught their eyes, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. And I was like, look, Gillette, we got company on our right. There's wolves.
Yeah.
And so we just kept singing our little song and walking like, yeah, we're fine. And the
Yeah.
wolves were like idiots and walked
Yeah.
away.
That's a very wolfish response. They're typically very much not interested in you.
No,
Yeah.
but
So,
like whether it's getting to travel on these adventures or, getting to write and photograph and, because I mean, a lot of people, that's like a dream life
right.
that you're living. Well, except for the bear thing, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, I think my suggestions are um, to start small. I mean, when I started doing outdoor stuff, I was just a little kid going with my parents. And when we went to the Boundary Waters for the first time, they had no idea what they were doing. I mean, we'd been camping and, started out at state parks and everything close
yeah,
to home. Um, but it's so important to start small, but then b connect with people who can help you get to the next level. So when we went to the Boundary Waters for the first time, we worked with some friends of the family who had gone forever and could share a lot of knowledge and a lot of equipment with us, and that was so helpful. We still stumbled along, and when I went to camp to Minojin, it was just kind of a paradigm shift to me because I'd been out there and I'd paddled a lot, and I learned that I really didn't know how to paddle properly, and I didn't know how to portage properly. I knew that I didn't know how to portage, but I learned how to do it.
yeah.
I learned how well you can eat on a camping trip. There's no reason you can't cook a lot of stuff from scratch, cut carrots up. You don't need to do freeze dried meals or packets of whatever. But I learned all those things because I was connecting with people who could teach me. So it's so important to learn from those who have come before you, and to not feel like you're above that necessarily. Like asking questions, or that's like some of the smartest uh, ways to go about life. You can learn a lot more. So you just got to connect with those people who are willing to answer your questions and kind of take you under their wing and foster your growth in whatever it is: photography, travel, camping. Because it's very, very rare that you're doing something that no one has done before. So there's almost always people that you can learn from. So use those resources, and don't be above going to the neighborhood park or the state park and just having fun with that, to get you outside and to get you um, into these experiences in the beginning. So,
All right. Well, thank you for that.
yeah.
We were wondering if you had any, like a final reading or anything you wanted to do before we close out.
Ooh, a final reading. I have let's see. I'm trying to think if there's a good outro. I don't want to do the epilogue because I think it's really a cool thing to work up to. Um, no, I think I probably won't close with a reading. But I think I'll just close by kind of reiterating that, I guess two things. First, I'll say, if you want to write a book, if you want to write it all, I think the most important thing is to practice it. Whether it's keeping a journal or working on a focused text or manuscript, I think just that repetition,
Mm-hmm.
and also getting into a rhythm that is regular for you, it can be super beneficial. So like for me, I write in the mornings before I do anything else, and it's best if I can get up before anyone's awake, before even the sun's up. So Minnesota's great for that in the winter.
Yes.
Got a lot of extra time.
Oh yeah.
So starting, whatever, playing to your strengths of writing, and then just kind of turning that into a regular practice. It can decrease the time it takes to get back into it, and it can improve your quality and also the fun that you have doing it. And then the other thing that I'd just kind of share is, there's so many amazing places to see. You don't have to go to Northern Canada to see an amazing place. You don't have to go to Peru or Thailand. There's a lot of things that you can see close to home as if you look for them. So get out there and enjoy it and do it safely. But just do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your great book and this fantastic talk. And I wish we had more time because it seems like there's so many more interesting stories you could share with us.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This has been a lot of fun. I'm glad we're able to still have the event and hopefully get, to more people through the powers of replay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'll look forward to coming and seeing you when things calm down.
Yeah, we would love to have you come visit, and maybe we could get people together for lunch so they can get the book signed and talk to you some more, because that's the disappointment for me, is like we don't get to have lunch after. And
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well. We'll do it again down the line.
Absolutely.
And I'll look forward to that. So
All right. Well, thank you very much.
you're welcome. Thanks everyone.